Hey guys, we're back.
Well, this week in the news, Donald Trump got voted for a Nobel Peace Prize. This is our new...
This is our new voice?
Yes.
Do you think we'd be more popular if we had that, like, what's that Bob and Tom in the morning? Like, I always say, hey guys, Bob and Tom in the morning.
Is that how they sound?
I don't know. I don't even know if those are real people. I just feel like those are, like, radio jocks. Hey, this morning, like, all the way from Tunisia, we got the Rebel Reva, and he's going to talk about...
We have Fart Man in the studio in about 5 minutes.
Fart Man, that sounds like a real person.
Yeah, that's totally radio DJ or radio guest, Fart Man. He's going to be in the studio promoting his new album, Farts Volume 2. How did that become the thing? Because I noticed that Joe and Mark, when they do Tuesdays, it's not too differently to the way they talk, but the momentum and the rhythm that they have is a little bit different. It's like more for radio than it is for podcast.
Than for like podcasting?
I can't do it. I think I would have to take 10-minute breaks if we had to do that kind of voice.
And top 10 today, we have Billy Blues. He's finally got up to #1 since his wife burned his house down. This guy's going to need some extra love, guys. Please donate to his GoFundMe. I don't know.
That's about right. That was a good detail.
Hey, guys. We're back.
Oh.
It's such a weird type of voice, but it is like a specific... I think it's specific to like radio. I wonder if it's just because you just are in the... I feel like if I was in a DJ booth by myself all day, I'd start getting pretty wacky.
You start losing it?
Yes, kind of like you're in the hole in prison. I feel like if I was in prison, I'd start doing crazy characters also.
It sounds like I just couldn't do it. Nor do I even like talking to people. You're like, is this your real voice? Like, I can't have a genuine conversation if that's how I was talking to somebody on radio.
I mean, I did something, I can't remember exactly where I was now. Maybe somewhere in the Midwest. I did some like radio show. And the guy was a comic who I always thought was really, really funny, but he's kind of like bitter now. And he like lives on a farm or something. And in between breaks, he was just like nasty. You're like, hey man, can you just pretend to be that DJ guy still? Because like your real personality is not great.
Isn't that insane that somebody can be that mean?
I think he's just not in a great place in his life. I don't know what it was, but it was just like a totally different, it was like DJ dude and then like DJ idiot. Or like just not that nice.
Yeah, you're like, can you just sustain your DJ for your whole life? No, I remember a lot of comics back in the day, they would tell me stories about doing radio, and they said a lot of the radio people would just be awful. Like, I remember this guy named Jeremy Hotz, who was a big Canadian comic, he had some success down here, but I don't think he never did anything. Also, I also heard he was kind of miserable too when he would come and do the road down in, I guess in America. But he was on a radio and they're like, oh, Jeremy, wow, that's a real big schnoz you got going on.
What a
like,
weird,
fuck
what a
you.
weird way to do radio. That's so bizarre, especially radio, you're not being seen, so you could just roll in with fucking sweatpants. Imagine someone's like, hey, way to knock us up. See your career going down the tubes.
Thanks for dressing up for us. It's like, you don't give a shit. It's so, and then Maria Bamford has a well-known story of like, she was on the road, she had to do radio, and her act is kind of weird. I do think she's really funny.
She's super funny.
She did morning radio, and she's kind of a different personality for morning radio. And they asked her to do something. And then after she did it, it was like an act out for about 3 minutes. The guy goes, well, don't quit your day job. And it's so mean.
And she's like, I'm pretty famous and successful.
Yeah, I'm doing radio and I'm working the road. Or I don't know. I just remember hearing those stories and being like, that's awful.
She had a really funny joke. I can't remember it now, but you might remember it. Something about she was going to her therapist, and her therapist was telling her to like sing, I think, about stuff, and she was just singing about her ice cube trays, but it was like in a Whitney Houston song.
Yeah.
Do you remember that bit? It was so funny. I can't remember now. It's a long time ago, but it was something like that.
Yeah, she had a lot of good ones. I liked that this earlier on, she had this bit that I really liked about when you're doing a temp agency, the more ecstatic their voice is, the worse the gig is, where
That's
they're like,
probably accurate.
Maria, you will be selling fruit off of a fruit truck. Dress is casual.
That's so funny.
Yeah, she had some really good insights. But like for some people doing radios, like it's two personalities that probably shouldn't be in the same room together. Unless I've heard Bob and Tom is great to comics. Like they really set you up.
Oh, so I don't even know if those guys talk like that. I was just making that up. There is
Oh,
actually, oh yeah, I was making that up.
I don't know because I never listened to them because I never had radio in the markets that they were big in, because they were big in, like, I guess you would consider the B markets, like Kansas
Okay.
City and Beaumont, but they were never in Houston. So I haven't listened to radio in probably a decade.
No, I haven't listened to radio in so long. That's weird because I just thought I was making those people up. I didn't even realize they were guys that have a radio station. So I
No,
don't
they're
think they sound like
huge.
that. Okay, so maybe I did that thing where I just took them because I knew that and then added that awful fake voice to it.
They're probably in the same lines, but they're one of those guys that if you were a comic, this was about 20 years ago or further, like if you did their show, it meant it could really spike your career if you did well on their radio. But
Would you
now it
rather?
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but I feel like you could still do certain radio shows where you'll get big. Like, I guess Rogan doesn't have a radio show, but you could do Rogan. You could do. Would you rather do Rogan or Stern?
Stern.
You would rather do Stern. Stern's fun because while you're on there, they're probably bring out like some hot chick and make her rub her tits in your face, and you're like, oh, this is fun. I feel like a lot of uncomfortable things like that would happen, where they're like, hey, why don't you just blow somebody on air? And you're like, I don't know, is there anything else I can do?
Like I always end up doing stuff that I would never do in my actual life, and then you're like afraid to say no on air because it feels like you're gonna look like a bitch. That I feel like I probably would end up blowing people on air.
Yeah, because you're like, I remember I had a joke about how I felt like I hate like confrontation. Like if I was hooking up with a dude and he was like, hey, I have herpes, I'd be like, well, I guess I'm getting herpes.
All the time.
Where you're like, because it just feels, it's weird. Like, I'm fine with having arguments with people, but when you're in a situation like that where it's so weird, you're like, ugh. I don't know.
I totally agree, because I think about that sometimes, knowing that there's you do run into people in New York, and one of them, I was roommates with Aaron Glazer, the alleged four-time rapist.
Yes.
I knew him, and I knew him pretty well, that I wondered, I obviously know myself that if I saw him and he came up to me, I would probably be like, hi, Aaron.
Hey, how's it going?
Rather than like this, you monster.
I always thought it was
you
funny.
Can't do that. It's weird.
You can, but like it's gonna be weird. If like you start out screaming you monster and stuff, like how do you even continue with that? Do you know what I mean? It's like if you see him and you go, you monster, I hate you, it's like you have to be prepared to yell at him for 10 minutes at least.
Until he's disappeared into the horizon.
I always thought it was funny that you said you lived with him and he ate half your sandwich or something.
Yeah,
so he doesn't ask for consent.
It was a big deal when it happened, because I had never had anybody just blatantly go. It's not just like a weird leftover in a Tupperware. It was a plated food that looked like a restaurant style dish that I had put a saran wrap over. So it was, and he just ate the whole thing.
Also, sometimes there's stuff in a fridge and you're like, is that mine? Like there's no way you're just thinking a plated restaurant style dish is something you're like, I did this,
Did I make that? Yeah.
Maybe I got drunk and plated this whole thing for myself. And then like to not even say, hey man, I got drunk and ate your food, I left you $20 or something.
He didn't even do that.
He didn't even say anything, right?
I called him out on it. I just called him out. I just said, I just basically was like, who does that? That was crazy, Aaron. That's like really awful behavior.
And what did
Little
he
did I
say?
know.
Yeah.
He apologized. He was like, I am so sorry. I was just really drunk. The same thing he probably is doing for his rape.
All his rape allegations.
Yes.
Yeah, that's bizarre behavior. It'd be funny if he's like, well, if you don't like me eating your food, you're definitely not gonna like the other stuff I do.
Yeah, wait till you find out more what I do when you live with me. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I've talked about it before on here. I don't know. I mean, I was drinking during that time period. That was the first year of New York. There were plenty of opportunities.
For him to attack you?
Yeah.
I remember I hooked up with a guy when I was like 16, 17 years old. And then after I was talking to my friend about it, and I was maybe a little older, 18 or something, she was like, oh, I hate that guy. He raped my friend. I was like, this dude didn't do anything to me. It's such a weird, like when we were hooking up, he was very respectful. And I was like, well, maybe he learned his lesson. I don't know. What a weird thing to like hook up with a guy and you're like, because even rapists, I would assume they have girlfriends they're not raping. Look at like serial killers. They have wives they sleep near that they're nice to. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like such a weird, I don't know.
I know what you mean. Doesn't it feel like if you're a rapist, you're just raping everybody? Like, where do you get the constraint? So. Obviously, that's why it's always weird when guys are like, no, there's no way there's no way he raped those women. And then you're like, well, I mean, that was a lot of allegations. And like, you're not sleeping with your friends. You have no idea. Guys are different set behind the closed doors than they are like out in public.
I think everyone is.
I just found out there was a football player for the Cleveland Browns, which is really funny, got outed because he's into seeing shit photos from his girlfriend.
Does she shit on him or she's just shitting in the toilet and sending him a picture?
I think she's shitting in the toilet and sending in the picture. And he didn't deny it.
Good for him. Like, everyone's just shaming everyone. It's just like, if I was him, I honestly thought he was getting shit on his chest because I was like, that's actually a pretty smart move to not get tackled if you're in football, where you're just like, shit's been all over this dude's chest.
It's really smart to spread that out there, that you are into being smeared with shit so you don't get tackled.
But it also does, I remember I did Artie Lang's podcast, and this ties into shit a little bit, where he said he was hooking up with a chick, and I guess, like, I don't remember the exact thing. He said, like, maybe she was blowing him, and then after she blew him, she was, like, eating a cheeseburger, and he's like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I got to shit on that guy's chest next.
Oh, my God.
I don't know who can time a shit like that. I know, but it's so weird, because it's not like you eat one thing. Maybe she had, like, the type of system where if you eat fast food, you just shit right away. I don't do that.
Part of me is like, I hate blowjobs so much that I think if I was a prostitute, I would be like, I'd rather just shit on your chest. Like, that I could do.
But not many people can shit on command. Does somebody say, hey, I want you to shit on my chest? And they're like, all right, I'll let you know when it's coming. Like, that's such a weird thing to, like, have to work up to a shit.
I know. I can pee on command, but I can't shit on command.
No. Sometimes you just... like, you have no control over that. Like, if a guy said to you, I'm going to give you $1 million to shit on my chest, wouldn't you just be like, all right, I'll let you know? Like, I don't know what you do for that.
Do you think they like the warmth of the turd? Like, it's like, why don't you just buy a weighted blanket that smells like shit?
I don't know.
Shit, I can't handle scat.
First of all,
it smells so bad.
If I go into a public restroom and there's like even a shit stain, I'm turned off. It's like, I don't even want to pee on someone else's shit stain, let alone shit on someone, or like, that is a very weird fetish. Like, I mean, whatever. It's just like that to me. I don't know how you get to that level where like seeing shit makes you want to come.
But honestly, he's in the NFL. Like, it's not a bad investment. If that's what he's into and you're the girl that can do it, then you're like, you can have a pretty nice life. Yeah.
I mean, if you get to marry that guy, I mean, look, you don't want to be the girl that's just shitting on his chest and you're not getting a commitment from him. You know what I mean? Where you're like, I thought it was going to lead to marriage and it just doesn't.
Yeah, and then your friends are like ragging on you, and you're like, well, I mean, you live in shit, Cheryl, or like in squalor. Look at my house. This house, I shitting on a guy's chest paid for this house. Do you like eating here?
Yeah, you don't know how this money's made.
No
Also,
one wants to know how money is made.
No, but like, also, what if you break up with that guy and then his next girlfriend, you're like, I bet she doesn't take as big as shits as me on his chest. I mean, what a weird way where you're just like, what does she have that I don't have? And he's like, you know what she has.
You know, bigger turds.
Yeah, that's a weird one I never understood. There was actually a clip that not a clip of, I guess it was they're trying to rebrand pedophiles.
What?
Yeah, I can't go out of this right now. I wish I would have like had my computer.
It's
like
fine.
It's called it's like a 3-letter word, and it's basically it's called like man attracted to child. So maybe it's like MAT.
Well, there's NAMBLA.
Right, but this is like another where they're trying to rebrand. I think that's how like woke we're getting, where we're trying to rebrand for people who want to fuck kids. Like,
well,
this
it's
is
obviously a mental illness.
It has to be a mental illness. Also, though, it's weird because you would feel like this is definitely a problem in our society, and there really is nowhere to talk about this. So I don't know how any of these people, like, imagine that was your thing, like you were attracted to children. It's such like a crazy concept, but it's a real issue, and no one's ever addressing it because you can't talk about it.
Yeah, because you're, I guess, shamed for it. You're kink shamed. You're like, yeah. I'm into kids.
I remember there was, I don't know if Greg Stone had told me this, or maybe it was you, that there was a guy who said he was attracted to kids. He never had sex with them. And he was like, look, I just want to help other people. Did you tell me about that? And then everyone went nuts on this guy. And you're like, look, this guy can't help it. He's attracted to actual kids. What do you do?
Yeah, I guess if you're not acting on it, then that's good. But it is something to, I don't know. I mean, I just remember seeing that one documentary about it where there's an actual trailer park full of pedophiles, and it's kind of like a 12-step program. Not that they're like, you ever get fully, you know how for alcoholism, we never really say recovered because we're not, it's always an ongoing battle.
I'm sure they feel the same thing.
Yeah, where you do a 12-step program and you talk about your urges. And I was like, I mean, they did have people drive by and just yell out stuff by them, but I was like, at least these people are actively working on not fucking kids and taking ownership, where I felt like it was a little unfair to at least have to deal with the people, you know, driving by yelling that stuff out, where I was like, well, these people are helping each other. Like, they're doing something. They're taking a proactive ability to help these urges. And I thought that was fascinating. And it is weird because it's obviously a mental illness, and we're all about mental illness right now. Meaning, like,
only some of them.
Be careful. Yeah, only some. Yeah, that one for some reason. Well, not for some reason. Obviously, it's a heinous crime that ends up happening. But then we're gonna like start being like, you know, forgiving to people that murder people because we're like, that's obviously a mental illness, and you don't know how hard it is to deal with that.
People. What sucks too is like, if you're a person that's attracted to kids, you only have like a 3-year window to fuck kids. Like, if you like 13-year-olds and you're 13, it's cool. But like, once you're 15, it's a little,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, you peak very early in your life. It's just weird. Yep. Like, you know what I mean? You're like a 13-year-old when you're 13, and then you're like 15 and 16. You're like, and you're like, I'm still into those kids. And people are like, no, man, you can't do that anymore. Like, you can't be fucking 13-year-olds now.
No, I know. I remember, like, just looking back, I've always been grateful. Even when I was around that age, I wasn't even attracted to people my age. It was always older. It was weird.
Well, you're perfect for a pedophile. You're a pedophile's dream. You're like, oh my God, I only like 30-year-olds when I'm 15. And they're like, that's great for us.
Well, I remember having a crush on the guy that was painting our house, and I would follow him all around the house. And in my mind, I was thinking, we would fall in love. And then the twist came about. He thought I was a boy the whole time. So then it burst my bubble. I was like, oh, this is never going to work out.
That's hilarious. He thought you were a boy.
So I feel like if you're an adult and you notice that a kid is totally crushing on you, this is how you get them to stop. Just call them by a different gender.
I remember when I was like 16, I had a crush on the guy that lived downstairs from me. His name was Junior. He worked for FedEx. Listen to this crazy story. So his ex-wife also, so he was married, he had 2 kids, and then his ex-wife lived across the street with her 2 kids. So he had 4 kids. It was just like such a weird thing where I thought this guy was like attractive when I was 16. He was probably like 35 or something.
Yeah.
32, I don't know. But I also think like he kind of liked me too. I know that's crazy, and I don't think he would actually do anything, but there's no way he didn't like me.
He was probably like, if you were 7 years older.
Probably. And
it's funny that
his wife was so possessive too.
Oh, really? Well,
I mean, he wasn't
like 13-year-olds.
Well, he didn't do anything to me where I would think he was like going to have sex with me, but like I kind of feel like he, in another lifetime, he would have liked to hook up with me, just like Deborah's dad.
Yeah, he probably could have married you 50 years prior.
Yeah, I would be a hot commodity. My father would have to probably give him like a horse or something for my dowry. And then he could marry me.
Funny at that age that you, like, I'm in love with a painter, and then like you're in love with the FedEx guy named Junior, that you're like,
yes,
you don't care what he does, you're just blinded by love. He could have lived with his parents, and you're like, he's amazing.
Oh yeah, at that age it doesn't matter. Yeah, at 16 I'm like, first of all, my dad was a postal man, so FedEx just seemed right in line with that.
Yeah.
They're like marrying somebody who does what my dad does. You're like, my dad's gonna love this.
My dad also delivers mail too. Mm-hmm. So you guys have a lot in common.
Yeah. He was a nice guy though. But it's weird to like reconnect with somebody like that on Facebook, and now he's probably like 60. Or I don't know how old he is. And you're like, oh man, you look so much better 30 years ago. I'm sure he would say that same thing about me.
It kind of makes sense why guys wanted to marry 13-year-old girls back in the day, because they have no judgment or sense of the world, so they can't just be like, you need to get your shit together. I am not marrying a guy that works in the coal mine.
Well, the coal mine was probably a very good job, though.
I guess so. I was just thinking of like Loretta Lynn got married when she was 13 and then had all of her kids by the time she was 20.
How many kids did she have? I don't even know who she is.
She's that country singer.
Oh, I never know any country singers.
She's like up there with Patsy Cline and Dolly Parton, and
I know those two. I don't know who she is though. How many kids did she have? That's a lot of kids to have by 20. It sounds like she had a lot. That makes sense. Have one like every other year.
Yeah, and well, I remember going to school with this girl, and when I ended up running into her by the time I think she was 20, and I think she had all of her kids by then, like 3 of them, and had her tubes tied, that I was like, Jesus Christ.
But back in the day, that was normal. Not like we lived in the 1500s, but do you know what I mean? Like, it was just normal. At 13, 14, you were like the ripe age to get married. You had a bunch of kids, and by 30, you're dead.
It's perfect. Well, I was talking to my mom, and we all agreed, and it's like Nate Bargatze, and then I think Tommy Johnigan has kind of a bit of like, being a teen mom is the time, like that's the best time to actually have kids when you think about it. Everyone's helping you. You can still go to school.
Yes. Your
body bounces back.
I remember there was, because I had a similar joke, and then you broke my heart when you told me he had that same joke. And
I'm so sorry.
Oh no, I'd rather know. But it's funny because like there was a girl that I went to school with who got pregnant in school. She was like 16, and then by the time you're like 30 something, you're like, I'm done.
Yeah.
You have like a second lease on life.
You do, and 30 is so young to like start your second chapter.
Yeah, of your new life with your kid that's like, 14 or whatever. Like that's an age, whenever you can leave kids by themselves is kind of when like you're done.
Yeah. So like at 10.
Well, I think it depends where you live. 10's a little young. Like, I feel like I would leave a 10-year-old by themselves just because I have nothing in my apartment I care about. So if they burnt down the whole place, I wouldn't give a shit. But if I lived in a nice place, I probably would not leave a 10-year-old unattended.
Yeah, I definitely, isn't it weird, like, kids from a certain age, like even young, it feels like they're always trying to commit suicide unintentionally.
They're just
Like putting
doing
their
the worst
fingers,
stuff.
I know, tying their necks around like cords from the blinds, or putting their fingers in sockets, drowning in a pool, where you're like, what are you doing?
I'm sure there is a toddler out there that is not just being like mischievous. They actually do want to kill themselves, and they're going to grow up and say, "You stop me at every turn. Every time I tried to off myself, you just wouldn't let it happen. You wouldn't let it happen."
It's called, instead of calling like toddler protection, or what do they call it, child proof, they should just call it like suicide prevention.
Those kids are like, there was a documentary I watched where there was a kid who was, I think, 15, and he was super depressed. He tried to kill himself. Did you ever watch this documentary? It's really sad.
Is that the one where he did commit suicide, and it was in the stairwell, or this weird window shaft in his apartment building on the Upper East Side, right?
Yes, and the parents tried everything. They sent him to all the doctors. He was on all the medication. I mean, he tried killing himself all the time. Like, it's kind of like you can't turn your back. And I think when
That's
he finally,
awful.
yeah, I think when he finally like did it, like the family was like not at peace with it, but it's just like, I don't even think you could watch a movie. Like, he just was trying to kill himself like every day, where you're just like, how do you monitor that? It's just like, it's hard to keep track of someone like that. You know what I mean? Where he was depressed, and it's a sad situation, but like, they took him, he was on medication, they took him to all these doctors. I think he was on like, asylums and stuff. It's just like, what do you do in a situation like that?
I don't know. It was really weird. I'm also like, they were rich too. I mean, I know money doesn't buy you, but you're like, dude, like, you have it good.
I know. It's like, dude, do you know how many poor kids are trying to kill themselves and no one's stopping them? Like, also though, I think he had like a sibling. Imagine like being a sibling to this kid, and your parents are so consumed with him where you're like, oh, Jake's trying to kill himself again. And you're like, this guy just doesn't stop. You're like, how do I get any attention in this household? You're like, do I have to also try and kill myself for you guys to spend any time with me?
I know. I feel like as a sibling, after a while of that, you would get over it, because it's really funny as a sibling. You kind of end up like getting callous towards your siblings, where you're like, oh, are you going to kill yourself again? Like, you start making jokes and like ribbing them.
I would just think you see him jumping out the window and you're like, good. Like, you're just so fed up with it, where you're like, I've had enough of this. Like, this is the last 13 years of my life dealing with this every day, where you're like, enough already. I'm glad.
Nonstop. I have to babysit this person.
And they were super rich. Most poor people can't afford any of that stuff.
It is really interesting. Not that like money should be able to like buy you happiness, but like, I just feel like if that kid managed to survive his tendencies and like realize that's as good as it's going to get,
I feel like most people that want to kill themselves, if you gave them a beach house, they would probably turn it around pretty quick. I think they'd be like, oh, I don't want to die. I'm actually just poor. And this sucks.
Well, it's like you said also, or maybe like if your kid had suicidal tendencies, to be like, let's just sit down and write your suicide letter. Like, they start getting distracted, or like making their video, where I feel like if I wrote a suicide letter or a video, I would start getting like, you know what? This is actually pretty fun. Like, making this video, this is like satisfying me.
All you need is one little interruption too. It could just be like the census coming to your house, where you're like, oh God, I didn't even want to, I was just bored. You're like, now I'm talking to this person. It's just like a little interruption. For those of it's kind of suck too, like wanting to kill yourself and then like midway jumping off a bridge, you're like, fuck, I did not want to do this.
There is a documentary right? I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I should probably watch it because it sounds pretty good. But don't they say all the ones that survive jumping off, what is it, the San Francisco Bridge?
Yeah, they're all
That
like, I'm so glad I made it. Like, I think, like, I mean, it's kind of crazy to me that some of those people even survive that.
Yeah, I think I would just do a test run by skydiving and then see if I feel better after that. Maybe I wouldn't. You know what I mean? At least in skydiving, you're like, oh no, maybe my parachute won't open.
Right. And you're like, let me see if I was going to die right now, how I feel. I guess at those bridges, how come they don't just have like that net that catches people?
That's a very good question. I don't know.
Because I know they have those
Oh my
nets.
God.
You're
I'm
just
just
down
figuring
there
out.
with like 10 other people and you're like, fuck, man.
I know, or like, it's just funny to think that you are the guy that has to change out the nets. To be like, there's 10 people. Dude, there's 10 people on the nets today. Can you go out there and like
loosen them up? And the one guy's like, I'm just gonna come back tomorrow. And he's like, well, you're gonna end up in this net again. So
yeah,
like,
don't make me.
They have those nets where I guess the iPhone factory or something, where all the people just get upset working at that factory and jump out, but they just fall into a net. So I was like, why are we not doing the same thing with bridges?
Yeah, I don't know. But I always like Zach Galifianakis had a joke that made me laugh about like how he tried to commit suicide at his job, and then he survived, and he was like, do you know how embarrassing it was to go back into Little Caesars?
That's so funny, where everyone's like, I guess you're still here.
Like after you attempt,
you
have to go back and finish your shift. That there's got to be an embarrassment if you jump off your iPhone factory building and land in your net, and then you're like, they're like, where have you been? You were in the, like, were you in the net?
And everyone's like, yes, I was hoping there was a hole and I'd fall through it. It's so funny, like, to just have a net catching people coming off a bridge. It'd be funny if it was like lost and found and someone had to claim them. And someone was like,
oh yeah,
I just grew up in this lost and found net of suicides.
It's also funny for iPhone to be like, not even fix business practices, but they're like, just get a net. Like,
well, I want to know. Yeah, they don't fix your phone from like dying after 2 years, but they got this net out here to keep these people.
Yeah, good job, guys.
It is kind of crazy that we're totally cool with slave labor in other countries.
Oh, it's wild.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we all have Nikes, we all have iPhones. It's so, I mean, look, a lot of stuff is like hypocritical, but it is like so weird to be for democracy, but we're all on iPhones. Not democracy, but like that's the wrong word, but like liberals here, like we're so just like want everyone to have equal rights and stuff, and then we're just like all using iPhones. And
oh, all the time. I think about that. When you would go shop at Forever 21 and you buy leggings for like $1.43, right, and you're like, well, this isn't good. Like, obviously I'm committing a crime right here. I'm just supplementing a slave labor.
Yeah, I remember like when they had the kids in the cages, I think I had a joke that was about like how we're all against those kids in the cages, but like we're all using cell phones and buying Nikes. At least the kids in the cages are getting like a break. Or those other kids can't even kill themselves. They're fucking in a net if they try and out themselves, and then they're back to work. I always thought
they're
at least
sleeping under their desk.
Yeah, at least the kids in the cages were just kind of like relaxing, and they're like, "What a nice break! I'm catching up on my reading."
I got a blanket. It's AC in here.
Yeah, they're like, I'm sharing this with a couple other buddies. We're starting a podcast.
They're starting a. Oh my God, I would love to hear a Kids in Cages podcast.
Kids in Cages, what a great catchy title.
I love it. But I was like that the other day. I was like, are they still in cages? Like, I think we've moved on.
I think the kids in the cages are now building the wall. They're like, we could actually put these kids to work after they take a nice break.
Well, it feels like everything's on fire right now.
From gender reveal parties? First of all, those two people should be put in jail.
Oh, obviously. And that's not even the first gender reveal party that's created havoc. There was a pipe bomb one like a year ago, and then there was another one that did cause another fire somewhere, I think like in Arizona or something.
Okay, so you like Republicans can't see this fire happening from a gender reveal party and not think that abortion is a good idea. Like if that kid had been aborted, San Francisco and California, it wouldn't be burning right now.
Yeah. And they burn every year where you're like, maybe we shouldn't live in those areas.
I don't know why it need to have a big, huge. I mean, who thinks doing this over a field is a good idea? It's just like, there's no way this is going to end well.
Yeah. Also, I mean, like, it's crazy just to do pyrotechnics and not have the foresight knowing that you're going to create a disaster. Like this could, I mean, there were times when I would smoke a cigarette, I would be so nervous just like flicking it out because I was afraid that it was going to catch something on fire that I always like rubbed it on the pavement and then threw it away or poured water on it.
And then these people are just willy-nilly just burning up thousands of acres of land. Like imagine you were in one of those houses that burns down because of that. You should be allowed to go punch those people right in the face and like kill them.
Absolutely. Also, no one gives a shit about your kid. Like, we don't care what the sex of your kid is.
Especially now that they could just change it. At least back in the day when you couldn't change your sex, you're like, well, now you're definitely a boy. And now you're like, who knows? What's the point of a gender reveal? This is just your gender right now. This doesn't mean this is your gender for the rest of your life.
I think your gender reveal should be later when you've determined what gender you are.
Yeah, I had that like joke about gender reveals now probably takes so long because there's like 100 genders. How do you even signify what the other genders are?
That's so many cake flavors.
So bizarre. Yeah, those people should be put in jail and their kids should be taken to China and working in the factory.
Oh, definitely. That should be their punishment. Like your kid has to go work in a third world country.
Yes. If you do a gender reveal, that should be your punishment. Your kid is now in another
country. Makes you wonder if they'll make gender reveal parties illegal.
They should. Or you just do a gender reveal where you go in the old-fashioned way, find out it's a girl, and then you just tell people. I don't like. Who cares about getting to? It's just another way to get together. Like all those parties where there's like baby showers, wedding showers, engagement parties, and there's like it's just like so much. You're expecting so much from people. You expect so much from people. It's crazy to me.
It's definitely
bachelor parties. You're like, hey man, I'm giving you a small chunk of my fortune.
I'm just going to your wedding. That's all you got. Like, it's just too much. It's also a lot of money to keep going to these things. I think Beth Stelling had a great joke about a gender reveal. She's like, I don't know. I feel like popping out of a vagina is a pretty awesome gender reveal.
That's really funny. Also, I remember my best friend that lives in Texas. When she got married, like, I had to fly down there, so I didn't give her a gift. I just didn't have a lot of money at the time. And then I had, like, some lawsuit from a drunk driver that hit me, and I gave her, like, a nice gift. And this was like a couple years after. And then like a month or two later, she got divorced. I was like, I should have just held out that extra couple of months. Because that's the thing. Like some people have 2-3 weddings and they expect you to do all of that shit for all of them. You're like, no way.
You're like, you're going to have to use the blender from the first wedding.
Yeah. You're like, I hope you took it and didn't give it to Rob.
It must be embarrassing after a while when you've had several weddings under your belt and you're like, I would keep it smaller and smaller as I progressed into the amount of weddings that I've had for myself.
Of course, you can't have a big, huge wedding on your third wedding. Although I think my mom did. Well,
I guess maybe you're like, I didn't really like the other two.
No, but my mom, so the first time I think she eloped with my biological father. And then my dad, I think she had a very small wedding. And then when she married her James, she had like a big wedding, like an actual gown and stuff. It was so bizarre. She's in like her 40s, I think.
That's like, it is super funny to be in your 40s and you're in like a princess dress. It looks like you're wearing a like schoolgirl's outfit.
Yeah, she was like in a princess dress.
With like your salami chest and then like...
Well, it was like all lace too, you know, because she was a virgin. So it had like lace going down the arms and everything. And she was like, oh, I can't wait to have wedding night virginity sex. Yeah, she was like all covered up like a virgin. It was like insane.
You're like, you're not fooling anyone.
No, and I had people at the like I invited friends to the wedding that I don't even talk to anymore. I mean, that's mostly how stuff goes. Like, think of all the weddings you've gone to. How many of those people do you still actually talk to? Because there's kind of people in and out of your life for just a couple of years.
It was really hard to put the list together because it is true. You're like, and I was told this from other people that got married. They're like, you're never going to see most of these people ever again. And they're never, a lot of them are not even people that you would consider close friends later on in life.
I think comedy is a little different because you'll see a lot of those people. But like if you work at a regular job, like all the people I was close with when I worked at that law office, I don't talk to any of them. I talk to maybe my boss once in a while, but I don't talk to any of those people, like at all. But if I had gotten married, 7 years ago, I would have probably invited the whole office. Do you know what I mean? So it's just like those people you don't talk to at all. It's just it's so weird.
It is weird because Joe and I will talk about and there were people that we didn't invite that we were like kind of wondering why we didn't invite them when we were inviting another person that ended up just not being in our life. And then you regret. I sometimes feel like that's why people renew vows, is so they can be like, make it up to the people.
That's actually not a bad idea.
That didn't get invited. But then here's the other thing too. So thinking about doing the wedding, I didn't even want to do a big one because honestly, most people actually don't want to go to a wedding.
Almost
maybe your family.
Maybe when you're in your 20s and it's like still fun the first couple of ones, but it's like, remember when you were 16 years old and you kept going to sweet 16s? Like the first couple of ones were fun, and then towards the end you're like, who cares? I've done this already so many times.
It's just a party.
Yeah, I remember there was a girl, Erin, that I worked with at that office where the office that did the abortions. And I didn't go to her wedding for some reason. I felt a little bad, and now I'm like, thank God. I didn't even talk to that girl like 2 years after that. She's already like, it's just so crazy to go to people's weddings and then you don't even talk to these people.
No, it's weird. It feels weird. I had another one that was weird because I was a bridesmaid in this girl, and we were pretty close because it was in the Houston comedy scene. But then when I moved up here, it was just, as time goes by, it was harder to keep contact with her, or just people in general in my past from like the comics from Houston. And then by the time like I got married, I was like, I don't even talk to her that much. And not because I'm like, oh, fuck her, we had a falling out. It was just that we drifted apart. And I was like, it would be really weird to have her come up here. She'd probably decline, which is fine, which I would have been like, oh, cool. One less person.
Yeah, I mean, like I was in my mother's wedding party and I don't talk to her half the time. Do you know what I mean? So like there's a good chance that you're just not going to talk to anybody like years later, especially like switching jobs. There's people that you would never ever invite now. It's just weird. Like you have these big elaborate weddings and you're like, I don't talk to half these people anymore. There was a girl the other day that I passed a place when I was driving, and I was like, I think that girl got married there. And I was like, I don't even have her phone number. Like I went to her wedding. I don't even have her phone number to call her.
Yeah, it's so
weird.
It is bizarre. And then I remember so when we technically officially got married at Justice of the Peace or whatever, and then my sister brought her friend that she didn't let us know. And so in our day of getting actually married, we have this girl named Renee that we don't even know in our wedding photos. And we're like, who the fuck is this person?
Did you at least put her on the end so you could just cut her out?
I've got to go through. Joe was so livid.
You're like, Renee, you're like, obviously we don't even know who you are, so please don't take any pictures with us. Is it like a close friend of your sister's?
Yeah, it's like my sister's roommate for years, but it was one of those things where you're like, why did you bring her? She's in all the photos now of that day. So we just have this rando. This
will be a nice, I guess, way to introduce this topic, because I've talked to you about this, and I'm upset you're not more into 90 Day Fiance.
Okay. I'm trying to get into it.
I get that. There's a girl that lives in Connecticut. Her fiance is from South Africa. She goes to pick him up at the airport with her two best friends. And they had a place in New York City where like, so you go there with your friends. First of all, like she put like rose petals in the airport and like the guy's cleaning them up and they're like, she's like, no, leave them. He's like, you can't just throw trash on the floor. To him, rose petals are just trash. Do you know what I mean? Like that's his job. So she's like, no, leave them. And then this guy shows up, her two best friends are there, and you're like, wow, this is cool that I have like this little entourage to welcome me. But then after they hung out with them for a couple of days, and you're like, hey, I don't even know you two. Like, why are you here? This is so bizarre. Now I'm just spending my first, because they haven't seen each other probably in 6 months or something. And now you're like, well, obviously we just want to be together and fool around and fuck and stuff. And now you got these two people that are like hanging out with you. It's just so bizarre to do that.
Do you think she brought her friends as a buffer?
No, because as soon as they got back to the hotel, they kicked them out. And they were like, because the people got back to the hotel room with them and they were like, hey, what do you want to do? And the couple were like, hey, we want to like fuck. So like, you got to go to your hotel room. It's just weird once that happens. Like, I don't think she thought further, like down the line about how weird it is. Then they're just like out at sushi, all of them. It's just, it's such a weird thing where to bring this guy from, South Africa, he's been traveling all day. And then you're just hanging out with two people you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I've done that. I did it once on this date. It was so weird. You brought
a friend?
Well, here's what happened. So I was hanging and she's my best friend.
I
know.
Wrong.
Dude, I know. But here's the thing. You know how we were saying that I sometimes don't like confrontation and I didn't want to say no?
Oh, yeah, I get that. That's true, yeah.
So
I do get that.
We were hanging out all day and then I was like, oh shit, I'm going on a date. It was the club owner of the last stop. It was his son. And this is probably one of the worst dates I've ever been on. And not only just because of what I did, but maybe he was mad at what I did. So my friend was like, I'm having so much fun. Like, I still want to hang out. She's like, do you think I could come? And I was like, yeah, I guess. Like, I don't know.
That's such a weird way to ask somebody. Was that girl in love with you?
I don't think so, but we're really close to this day, but never like hooked up, of course. But
so yeah, she was just having fun then.
Yeah, and she's my childhood friend too. Like I've just known, she's like, for a long time we were just like inseparable. But I do know that there are times when I'm like, you can't come along. Like this is not one of those times. But at the time I was like, okay, I brought her, and then you could tell he was like
less than enthused.
Yes. And then so I had a show later that night at the club, and he's like, can I come to your show? So now I'm like having a hard time saying no to him, being like, you can't.
So now it's three of you coming to your show now?
There's three of them coming to my show. And then I went up on stage. I did my set. At the end of the set, I hear him yell out from the back of the room. And this is a Friday night. It was full. It was a guest spot. He goes, you forgot to do this one bit. He yells it. He's the club owner's son. He's super nice, but I just thought he was kind of a spaz. But now looking back, I was like, God, I was a spaz too. And
Did you do that joke?
No, because it was already too late. I was like, I'm done. I just said yes. And then he meets me in the hallway after I walk off stage. And he was very complimentary, but then I was like, what are you doing? Like, that is so insane to yell out, I forgot one of my jokes, or like, please do this bit. And then he was kind of flabbergasted that I would be like upset that he was doing that. But then we were like, both parties were doing things that were so wrong on all things. And then he had been getting drunk. And then the headliner was Dwight Slade. Do you know that guy? He was like Bill Hicks' best friend.
I know that name.
And he needed a ride back to the hotel. And then my date was like, I'll drive you back. And he was wasted. And Dwight Slade's like, I don't need a ride from you. We were just probably two alcoholics trying to like make things happen that night.
Well, you probably were pretty young too. So it's also harder to say stuff.
Yeah, I was 22, I think.
Yeah, I remember being at maybe an AA meeting or something, and I was very new into program. I didn't understand a lot of like the steps or like people pleasing. I had no idea really what that was. And we talked about it, I guess, in the meet, because basically you're not supposed to people please, right? Yeah. So I go into the bathroom, and this girl who had been in AA for much longer than me comes in there, and I had like, this is many years ago. It's like probably 14 years ago. I had one of those clips on where it's like a long ponytail.
I miss those. A fall, right?
Yes, it was nice. And she was like, oh my God, I really want that. And like, she wants it. She was like, can I have it? And it was like, I just learned about people pleasing, and I felt so uncomfortable in this bathroom with her.
To be like, okay.
So now you're just coming back to the meeting with a little stub on your head. And now this girl has a long ponytail, and you're like, well, we know that's not, you didn't just grow that in the bathroom. Like, it's such a weird thing to just be like, okay, now you go back to the meeting without your ponytail.
Like, everyone's like, oh God, the new girl just got dominated.
They're like, we just tried to test you on people pleasing and you failed. You gave away your long ponytail. Now you look like a fucking retard.
That is so funny because the fall is such a black, like a thick horsehair.
I think that was before.
And then you have a little nubby ponytail that it's holding on to dear life for.
Yeah, and I assume if I also was wearing that, I might have been going out somewhere after, so it's probably all dressed up now with this little nubby ponytail, like nubby bun, and they're like, this girl just failed the people pleasing test, and that girl came back and was probably like, I got another one.
I feel like if I was that girl's sponsor, I'd be like, you have to give that back. Like, what is wrong with you?
It's so uncomfortable. I was like cornered in the bathroom.
It is really weird because there's like there's people like that in AA or just like 12-step program where you've got the people pleaser and then you've got the complete sociopath psycho that has no boundaries, and it's like a perfect place for both of those people to meet up.
It was the equivalent of like getting sexually assaulted, but it was just like with my ponytail.
Yeah, you got dominated.
Yes, and she's like one of those people that's like super annoying, and like I didn't know her well enough. I had just started program. I remember one time I went with her Christmas like shopping somewhere, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. We went to a mall, and all she kept telling me after is like, hey, you got to come see my apartment. Maybe she was going to try and rape me. She's like, you got to see my apartment. I want you to see my apartment. I was like, hey, I'm kind of crunched on time. I think I had a show later that night or something. And she was like, okay, but just like come in for a couple minutes. And I was like, no, I'm not. It wasn't like she had a house where I could park in her driveway. I'd have to look for parking, go walk to her building. I was like, I'm not going to have time to do that. And I think I didn't end up going. I was like, you got me one time with my ponytail.
Yeah, that's awful. I've met people like that, and it's really weird where you're like, you're too intense. You're coming off strong. Why do I need to see your house? I don't even know you. I don't have a desire to see your house.
I don't care about your apartment. But she's like one of those people. She's also another person where like they put lipstick on, but it's on their teeth. Like that's who she was.
Yeah, I had like a situation like that when I temped one of the first jobs that I had. It was just us taking boxes or stuff out of boxes from Target in a big room. And then this girl, she was maybe my age, a little bit older. And she was like her first job back since having her children. And she was just like, we're not making enough money here. I think we should say something. This is ridiculous. We shouldn't be saying, what do you do? Do you want to go out for lunch? So then I go and she's like, let's go eat over here. And then it was for our lunch break, we were eating at a restaurant that was probably like Midtown, that was a decent place, like probably like Côte de Dion or whatever it's called. And I'm spending maybe half of my paycheck for that day on our lunch, where I'm like, she obviously comes from money and doesn't need this, because like no one in their right mind on a temp job would go and eat at a restaurant like this. And then she was like, what's your number? Let's exchange numbers. So I exchanged, because you can't be like, I'm not going to exchange. I don't want to do this. I don't know you.
I don't have a phone.
So then she would text me 5 days later on the weekend and being like, we're having a big party on the rooftop. You should come. And I'm like, I'm not going. You're like, I cannot be best friends with you. There's no way I'm going to have it like this. Yeah. But it was so much.
And also like you said, you probably spend $30 on like lunch when you're only making maybe $50 or $60 for the day.
Yeah.
So this girl probably was like, this is the most fun day. And you're like, this is my worst day at work.
Meeting girlfriends. I met a girl that I can have lunch with. Like, I felt like that's what she was doing the temp job for, was just to hang out with other women.
I think I've talked about this before, but I was like 18 years old. I just graduated from high school and I had a job where, remember before text messaging, there was those phones where you can call and have somebody type a message. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like texting, but it was like or it was a beeper. It was a beeper that you could type a message. Do you remember
Okay.
those?
I remember
And
beepers, but I never got involved heavily with them. But I think I know that you could do that, and it doesn't sound
Right.
crazy.
I worked at a place where they did that, where somebody would call you up and you would have to type out the message. And then, like, that is a call center. I would do that all day long. And I remember the funniest message I ever got was a lady calling up and, like, because you just say, hey, what's your message? And then she'd be like, okay, I want you. And she was like Hispanic. She goes, I want you to type, are you going to come over and stick me in my booty? Like, that's such a weird thing to call and say to another person.
And Cardi B?
It might have been, but it was just such a weird thing to call and have to type into somebody's thing. And then another time I got a message where somebody was like, hey, I just got tested and I'm positive. You should probably get tested too. And you're like, and at that time you're like, you can't say to them, hey, like, this is probably better to do over the phone. It's so weird to get that text where you're like, I'm HIV positive. You should go get tested.
That sounds like really fun, juicy details that you were getting.
Yeah, that's a fun job where, like, a lot of the stuff wasn't that fun, but you would get messages like that. Because, like, imagine some of the texts that you had to send now. I don't know if people were sexting, but that would be weird to be calling somebody and having them type out, send me
Booty.
a dick. Yeah, like, ooh, I want to eat your booty. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to call somebody and say, ooh, I want you to eat my booty. Like, that would be such a long way. It's like before texting of doing that. I don't even know if there had to be people that were saying sexual stuff like that.
I just like the idea if they keep talking back to each other like that sexually and you're the middleman for it. And then you're like, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah. It sounds like you should probably go home and shave your pussy first. You're like, can I just give you a little bit of advice here? And you're like, I don't want your advice. That was the worst because it was such a tiny room and everyone's just coughing in there. I remember there was a bird in there one day. The whole thing was awful. And there was also a guy that worked there that was also Adrian. So it was very weird because I'd get a lot of his phone calls.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, man, I think this 50-year-old dude is probably for you. I was like 18 at the time. It was so funny to have somebody else working there with the same name.
Those jobs are so wild because it's like it's everybody from all walks of life are working there. Yes. And usually it's like people that just got to America work at those jobs.
Yeah, and people that just like got paroled and are out of prison. It's just like the weirdest bunch of people. It's, you know, it's not like a high paying job. So it's like a lot of weirdos working there.
I always thought that would be a good show. Like, you know, how like Taxi was such a great show because it was just a conglomerate of people. We were like, those telemarketing jobs have such a wide range of crazy from all aspects that it's really funny to put them in one room.
I would think now it must be so hard to get people to telemarket. How long are you on the phone with somebody before you just, I don't respect those. And it sounds awful because I know it's a job, but I don't even give them like the respect to listen to them. I just hang up on them midway.
Same. It's probably nicer that you do that instead of having them like do their whole spiel and then be like, I'm not interested. I think it's just easier to just be, as soon as you hear like, you know, that voice or because they speak in a tone, you just hang up. All right. Well.
All right, guys. This has been fun.
Vadge Podcast at Gmail. Yeah.
Yeah, Vadge Podcast. Leave us some, we'll do questions and comments on the Patreon.
I think that's it. And then we'll see you
Sunday. That's a wrap.